대신 We're going to call the session back in order, and we're going to do a roll call just to confirm that we have quorum. Trustee DeVitis is not expected, and he's not here. Trustee Earhart? I'll come back to Trustee Earhart. Trustee Hassan, and he was not expected. Trustee Lee? Trustee Rajwani?
Here.
Thank you. Trustee Patel? Trustee Shen? And I know that Trustee Shen had some potential conflicts for the evening as well. So,
Oh, Trustee Earhart's here.
thank you. I need, or Trustee Wong, I'm sorry. Trustee Wong, are you here? So I need either Trustee Lee, Trustee Patel, or Trustee Wong to confirm that they're here before we can proceed.
Somebody calling
Can you
them?
send them an email?
Yeah, I'll write this.
Oh, okay. We've sent an email asking them to rejoin, so hopefully that'll happen. Okay, so I need, at this point, we're still looking for Trustee Lee, Trustee Patel, Trustee Wong, or Trustee Shen to confirm that they've rejoined. So I'm here. We've confirmed that Trustee Earhart and Trustee Rajwani are online, and we're still looking, we need a fourth for quorum. So can I get either Trustee Lee, Trustee Patel, Trustee Shen, or Trustee Wong?
Can you text them?
Yeah, we have.
Call Nana.
So I'll reiterate that at this time, I'm looking for Trustee Lee, Trustee Wong, Trustee Patel, or Trustee Shen to confirm that they've rejoined the meeting.
Went to voice. I texted James. You said you were restarting at 7:20.
I said 7:20.
You still have 10 minutes.
Yeah.
10 minutes. I have 3 numbers for Zakir. I don't know which one is the right one. Do you know which number is the right one for Zakir? I already texted. I know you texted. I was going to phone.
Can you do 416?
It's a 416 number?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I'll ask that if trustee Lee, trustee Wong, trustee Patel, or trustee Shan has joined us online, if they could please confirm.
Text to what now?
Numbers ring. No, went to voicemail.
And we're looking for trustee Lee, trustee Patel, trustee Shan, or trustee Wong to confirm that they've rejoined the meeting so that we can commence. We need one more for quorum. Trustee Shan, can you please confirm that you were able to join us?
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. That confirms that we have quorum, and we are formally, we're back, we've returned from recess. The first report for consideration today is 4.1, which is the contract awards for operations, which is on page 1 of the agenda. Director Latouche?
Thank you, and through you, Chair, over to Associate Director Zucker.
And thank you, and through the chair, I believe that our senior manager procurement will be presenting this report.
Thank you, Stacy. Through you, the chair. For the operations contract awards, we have one item in Appendix A, one item in Appendix B, and 3 items in Appendix C for board approval. Are there any questions for the operations contract awards report?
I'm not seeing any online. Anybody have any questions? Okay, then I'll ask to open the vote, please. Sorry, my fault. I apologize. Yeah, item Appendix A is for receipt. Appendix B is for approval, and Appendix C will be for receipt pending board approval. I need a mover and a seconder, please.
I'm happy to move. Trustee Earhart.
Trustee Earhart moves.
Trustee Rajwani seconds.
Thank you, ladies. Can we open the vote, please?
Shan in favor.
Trustee Patel, we understand that you've joined us. Will you please share how you vote, please?
I'm in favor, Chair.
Thank you, sir. And that carries. The next item is item 4.2, which is contract awards for facilities, which is on page 13 of the agenda. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, again, I will ask senior manager Manathan to respond.
Thank you, Associate Director Zucker. Through the chair, for the contract awards facilities report, we have 15 items on Appendix A to be received for information, 7 items on Appendix B to be received for committee approval, and 3 items on Appendix C to be approved. Are there any questions for the facilities contract awards report?
Thank you. Trustee Patel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, staff, for this report. And I'm sorry I don't have the item in front of me, but I specifically want to ask about the contract regarding the Band-Aid. I think we are ordering some Band-Aids for school safety and something, if I'm not wrong. Am I correct? To you, Mr. Chair?
Through,
If
Sorry.
you can share some light, Trustee Earhart.
I don't
sorry,
have it in front of me, so I'm sorry.
Believe that was on the report that we just approved for operations. There was one for a contract built in for several items.
Okay,
It
so
was
never
believed in
mind.
Appendix B. Apologies, Trustee Patel.
If it's in there, then just take me out of the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions as it pertains to 4.2, which is the facilities awards? Hearing and seeing none.
Trustee Earhart, quickly. I was excited to see the Island Public School EV charger ports for the buses. I simply wanted to note that from the Environmental Legacy Fund. That's something that, as a board, is in alignment with the climate strategy, I believe, that we had discussed, as well as some of the things that through transportation group reports that have come to board. I don't know if staff would like to elaborate on that, but I noted it as quite exciting. Thanks very much. I don't know if staff would like to note anything about it. It looks like quite aligned with some of the things that have come to board in terms of the direction that we've recently established as a board.
Would Executive Officer Maya Pichette have any comments on that?
Oh, thank you very much, through the director. Yes, we're very excited about this. The business case certainly made sense because the Ministry of the Environment does not allow refueling of vehicles on the island. So the buses have to go to the mainland to get fuel, which you can imagine is quite expensive. Not only that, but it does present an environmental risk when you're carrying buses across a body of water on that have fuel in them. So although the buses are not ours, they are owned and operated by one of our approved vendors. We really do see this as a very important strategic move in terms of sustainability by being able to install these EV chargers at the school. So thank you very much for asking about this. We are quite excited about this.
Thank you for that additional information. It's thrilling to know that it'll be more efficient in terms of being able to refuel, as well as better for the environment overall, particularly in our important urban environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. And I'm going to pass the chair to Trustee Rajwani. Are you able to take the chair?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just going to follow up with a question through the chair for Executive Officer Pichetti. Do we believe that we will be able to use this purchase to, over time, improve our ability to make a business case for spending a little more upfront, but ultimately in the end, having a more what we hope would be a more economical as well as environmentally friendly portion of our fleet or our usage?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can take that question. Yes, we are hopeful that this, as well as we're doing some other pilot work in the EV with our bus fleet, that will show a practical use for EV as of both environmentally as well as economically. So we are excited to have this happen on the island. It'll give us some data, which will help us further our study of the EV and how that it relates to student transportation.
Great, thank you very much. And I too share the enthusiasm, and it's an exciting time. And I know that students are really interested in environmental issues, and getting to see us act in an environmentally responsible way is important. It's important on many levels, but it's important for students to see us doing that. So I think this is great. And with that, I'll take the chair back. Trustee Rajwani, thank you. I'm going to, it's worth noting that Appendix A is for receipt, Appendix B is for approval, and Appendix C will be for receipt pending board approval. I'll need a mover and seconder, please.
Trustee Earhart's happy to move.
I can second it.
Trustee Patel will second. Thank you both. We'll open the vote, please.
Trustee Patel in favor.
Shan in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Trustee Lee is
In favor.
in favor. Thank you. Trustee Wong still hasn't rejoined. Okay, we'll mark her absent. Close the vote, please. And that carries. The next item is 4.3, the financial facts, revenue and expenditure trends from February 2025, which is on page 27 of the agenda. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, as trustees are aware, this is a report that we bring forward annually. It's very informative. There's a lot of data in the financial facts, and we do share it on our board website. And I will be happy to turn to Executive Officer Snyder. And then I know that we have Manager Jennifer Lee on line as well that can speak to the communications of this, the communication plan related to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Associate Director Zucker, and we are pleased to present this as an annual report that we put forward to provide transparency to our stakeholders of where our resources are going, some other data that's available in the report. This is a little different this year in a couple areas, and I'll highlight them for you. Obviously, on page 7 of the report, we have Bill 124, a brief narrative on that, as it does impact some of the comparative figures over time. As always, on page 8 of the financial facts, we have our funding gaps presented. There is one small exception this year, which is supply costs. When we were trying to develop under the new, as you know, this is the first year of core education funding, and the layout of the grants is somewhat different. And therefore, it was difficult for us to ascertain the funding that supported supply costs, as it wasn't in the traditional way we saw it in the grants for student needs. We did contact the Ministry of Education as to who they could assist us in determining the funding that supported supply costs, and they did not have that information available as they were in a rush themselves to get core education funding out. But they have made a commitment when they issue the 25-26 funding announcements that the funding allocated towards supply costs will be available. As a result, we used our 23-24 financial facts published amount as the gap until we have further information, and we'll correct it either later in the year if we have the information or in a subsequent publishing of the financial facts. On page 15 of core education is explained. The new funding model is outlined, as well as on the pages following, we do a small comparative chart showing GSN and core ed and trying to align the grants. People can see over time the transition, as well as a detailed page on the core education grants. This net report covers the years of 2021 through 24-25. And we will be putting this out on our website once it's approved by the committee and board. And when we do put it on the site, we'll ensure it's AODA compliant. I'll turn it over to Jennifer Lee to speak about our communications plan.
Thank you, Craig Snyder. Yes, I just wanted to speak about our communications plan. So as Craig mentioned, we plan to release this report on the budget page on TDSB's external website. And we're planning some companion pieces, some graphics for social media and some other newsletter items that we can share with trustees to give some of the highlights from this year's report. In addition to some of the budget town halls, once they are approved, we will have those details on our budget page so that everything is together in one place for the community to access. Thank you.
Okay, are we good to begin questions then?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we are.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff. I always think this is such a great wealth of information in this report. But I do have a couple questions because maybe I'm missing it. So on page 8 of the report are the funding gaps that are determined based upon the salaries that we have to be committed to and the provincial funding. And in total, those school-based funding gaps are over 139 million. Oh, sorry, for some reason my nose has started to bleed. I have a thing. Thank you. Sorry, I'll sound kind of weird. So my question is, and then we have the gaps on transportation and admin, and when you add the total gaps, it's 173. And then we have the benefit gaps of 61. So my question is there one chart that shows the funding gaps based upon commitments that are not within TDSB's control? And is there another chart anywhere that shows the funding gaps or the additional funding that we add, which are within our control? So a total number of funding that's not included in the grants that's outside of our control, and that includes, benefit funding, et cetera, and the salary differential. So there's a total there, and then a total of the additional funding that we put in, for example, on transportation or on special education. Do those charts exist in the document? Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the short answer is no, but I will explain a little more detail. The benefit funding gap is included in some of the gaps that you see in the top of the page 8, because the benefits funding gap is across all our staffing complements and the various ways we use staffing. We do show you the funding gaps on page 8, but we do not identify the sources to offset those in the guide.
I guess for you, Mr. Chair, why I'm asking is because we will have such a significant deficit projected, which will be coming in the report. It seems to me it will be helpful for our arguments that we're making in terms of the government is to differentiate between funding gaps that are not of our own making versus funding gaps where we have chosen to spend more than has been provided. And where we choose more is a little bit of a starting point to look at continuation of that or potentially some re-looking at that. So even though it's not here and for Ms. Lee on the line, I think it's going to be really important for our arguments to make sure we have an accurate table that can be explained of all the areas
where we have no choice but to fund and what that gap is versus the areas that we choose to supplement the funding and what that amount is. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff, I'm just saying that out loud because I think that has to become part of our advocacy work. For you, Mr. Chair.
And through you, Mr. Chair, we are in the process of updating the information to the current year. We had provided, I think, a year ago on the gaps that are board programs that aren't funded directly through ministry funding. So that work is being done to bring to you, hopefully in the March cycle of meetings. So that will be made available for the trustees to be aware of.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think this document is excellent.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Trustee Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you to everyone on the team who put this together. I think it's a fabulous document. I would hate to be the person working on it, but it's tremendously helpful for me as someone who's reading it. I have a number of questions. To begin, I'm trying to put a picture together on what this year is going to look like when it comes to income less expenditure. I don't think there's a chart on that. I think I can do the math, but I just want to make sure I'm doing the math correctly. Can staff just, through you, Mr. Chair, tell me what the net income less expenditure outlook is for this year?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm unfortunately not in the country right now, and I don't have a calculator with me, so I'd ask my colleagues, Associate Director Zucker, or I believe Cherie's on the line, if she could do that calculation for me.
Through the chair, I'm just confirming you're asking what our expected financial position is for next year?
This year.
Oh, for the current year?
Correct.
We are projecting a $28 million deficit to be using proceeds of disposition for 24-25.
Okay, and in our mid-year update, I think a number of months ago, staff, you were telling us that we are going to come in on budget. Is this the same type of on budget that we had before?
Through the chair, we will have still a $28 million projected deficit. There are some increases in revenues and also some increases in expenses. So it's not the exact same $28 million deficit, but we do still project, based on the changes that we are anticipating, a $28 million deficit in the current year.
Okay, so we planned for a negative $28 million deficit. We wanted to use POD to fill the gap, and then we're on plan overall. Don't care about how everything's moving around. Is that correct, through Mr. Chair?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. First of all, congratulations everyone on the team for once again coming in on plan. It's really hard to do, and I know it's probably the director's first year, but I don't think I've seen a year for us to come in on plan, and I know how much work it takes to be this good at managing a board this large, especially when a lot of the expenditures are just, they're mathematical forecast, and sometimes they're out of our control. So thank you to everyone on the team. I appreciate the efforts. Now, the other questions. I have gone through this line by line, and through you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Snyder. I hope you're in as fun a country as I am right now as well. Question on the so when I read this, I was enjoying myself too. When I looked at it on page, what is this? Page 26 of the report, amortization and write-downs. We did $365 million. Can I just get a sense of what that actually means from a cash position perspective?
Thank you, and through the chair. So under PSAB and the ministry's guidelines, we are to capitalize all the work that our colleagues in facilities do, as well. If we buy computers in the operational part, like laptops and stuff, we are to capitalize those and amortize those over time. And what the process that the ministry has done is said that, and I'll use an example of a $10 million addition to a school as an example. When we do that $10 million addition, we capitalize it to the balance sheet and we defer the revenue for that 10 million from the grants at the same time. And then as we amortize over 40 years for a building, we bring in 1/40th of the cost and 1/40th of the revenue to offset it. So the amortization write-downs you're seeing on that page are the amortization write-downs of our assets over time, and they're equally offset by capital revenues coming in to offset them. There is no impact to the bottom line for amortization.
Okay, I understand. So there is no cash impact to that $365 million
No.
expense. It comes out of like a capital revenue account. I don't even
Yes, yeah.
know it. Okay, that makes sense. Unfortunately, it also means we can't make changes to that amortization schedule to recognize less expenses either.
No, that's set basically on what type of asset we bought and what class of depreciation is, whether it's a 40, 20, or 7 or 8 for things like computers.
Okay, I was hoping to do something with that to close our budget gap next year. I guess the answer is no.
Unfortunately not.
Okay. All right. Next question. Page 44, I think it's page 44. There is a administrative line under central staff. And we went down $8 million year over year, but we went up like 10, 11 million since 2020. Is that a headcount increase or is that just a pay rate increase?
Sorry, which line were you looking at, Trustee Lee?
I think page 44 of the report.
Yep, I'm on that page.
And then there is the administrative line, admin staff. I forgot what it's called. So I'm looking.
It's the salaries and benefits for administrative staff. And
Yeah.
yes, that number we haven't really. In fact, we probably decreased over time if we gave you the FTEs, but that would be salary increases over time. And the big bump you see in 23, 24 is because of Bill 124 retros.
What is that? Sorry, can you remind me what that is?
That was where it was determined by the courts that the 1% wage amount that was set by the government was unconstitutional, and that the remedy was increases above that 1%.
I understand, but is that going to be a recurring number or no?
So what I would suggest is when you see, for example, in 24, 25, which is our projected at this point in time, you'll see that it's above 22, 23, and we have collective agreements and letters of understanding with our different associations and unions, so those wage increases will be brought in and they should be offset by increases in revenue from the ministry based on the collective agreements that have been settled at the provincial level.
Got it. So the 78 is the retroactive, that's the one time. The 71 is a stable number?
The 71 is a little bit of the retroactivity that's spread for a few small groups, but it's relatively a stable number going forward.
Did we see the actual revenue that came in to offset it?
Let me just look and see if I can find it quickly. It should be, I'm just going to go back up. Grants for student needs. Oops, sorry, I'm on the wrong. Cherie, if you could step in and just help me out on where we would see the additional revenues.
Yeah, so the about 314, I hope everyone can hear me. 314 million of the retro funding is included in the PPF section. The remaining GSN funding is spread in the GSN. It's not separated out.
Okay. But we're not being shortchanged by the funding to offset the increase in cost, is I guess my question.
No, we are not.
Okay, perfect. Okay, next question. I'm trying to be quick. Page 8, the supply gap. I know you said that there is no way to calculate it, but you did put a $5 million gap there through Mr. Chair to Mr. Steiner. Is that number lower than it was last year?
So what we did, because we are still working through this year, is we thought it was best just to use what we published in our financial facts in the previous year, because we couldn't ascertain a number and we didn't want to project any anything more than what we had in last year's. So the number is just what we published in last year's financial facts. That's why we put on page 8 the NA under funding, and we put a note under in the blue section below the school-based funding gap to explain that the supply costs aren't identifiable at this time. And so we're just projecting that number just to be a placeholder for now until we.
Okay, can I just, through Mr. Chair, make a recommendation to staff to think really hard about whether or not we would be able to answer questions on putting that number there without further disclosures, or is it better just to say TBD? But I'll leave that to staff. Just in case someone calls us and call our balloon, right? So the other question is, how much of this underfunding of $139 million or $140 million do we actually have control over? Through Mr. Chair.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would say that I'd have to think about percentage, but I would say that a large portion of it is uncontrollable because of the nature of, for example, elementary and secondary teachers. We have some program teachers, but for the most part, we are at class size, and we'd be what I would say is a typical allocation of teachers among school boards. So I don't think there's anything there. Early childhood educators, unfortunately, is because we had them before the Pascal report came out suggesting full day kindergarten. So our rates were already set higher than what the province did. So that's uncontrollable as well. And principals and vice principals, the board has allocated additional principals and vice principals there that have caused pressure. And then the school office is, again, a salary gap based on the benchmarks. And administration and governance is largely because the size of the board, we just can't get to that level of staffing and keep the functions of the administrative going forward, but we do offset it with other revenues to balance it within the funding and the gap that we have.
Okay, so if the province were to argue, we'd have $64 million-ish of controllable expenses on this.
Sorry, Trustee Lee, the 64 million refers to?
The 19.8 of ECE plus 12 of principals plus 32 of admin and governance.
Yeah, I would defer to Trustee Executive Associate Director Zucker, but I would say that argument would hold completely because you do have to have principals, and there is a marginal difference once you get rid of the additional principals we have on, but the school support staff is a gap in the salaries that is not an overinflation of staffing.
Okay, I know I'm out of time. But one last comment, recommendation to staff. I think it'll be helpful to put in bold, large letters on this page to let everyone reading this page know what number, what amount of funding gap the TDSB can actually control. I think that will answer some questions down the road. Thank you. Those are.
Thank you, and through the chair, appreciate the comments, and we certainly will be bringing that forward to trustees when we look at all of the areas that we are either spending more than we receive funding for, or spending and we don't receive funding. We will certainly bring it to trustees and then provide, as Trustee Laskin indicated, what's within our control versus what's not within our control. I think that will be really important, and we will certainly work with communications in order to be able to ensure that it is easily communicated to the public.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is that you're out of time, but did you want back on the list, or does that conclude your?
Not right now. I will put my name on it more time. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. I'm going to pass the chair to Trustee Rajwani. Are you able to take the chair?
Yes, I can take it.
Okay, I'm worried about quorum. We have quorum, we're good? Okay, so thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I'm looking at this document, and And it was interesting, the things I kind of skimmed over quickly the things we talk about all the time, like how much more we spend in special education, and because there's so much data here and so much numbers. So I'm going to concentrate on some kind of bizarre and unique, just asking about questions that jump off the page at me and that I don't understand. And there's no particular rhyme or reason to them. On page 19 of the document, in 2020, 2021, it was 68 million was the last year we got a funding stabilization allocation, and there's a note 10, but I couldn't find note 10. So I was wondering if we could explain what that was that is no longer being provided, and is it being provided under different headings in other places, or? So
Sorry, Executive Officer Snyder?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. I didn't realize. We will thank you, first of all, for noting the notes were missing on this page. So we'll make sure that they are reinserted. And I'll ask Cherie to remind me, because it was back in 2021, what the stabilization was for. I can't just on top of my head remember what it was, the $68 million, but it was.
Thank you, Craig. Through the chair, the stabilization funding was to support enrollment decline, and during the COVID time, and ministry supported us with stabilization funding to keep the operations going.
Yeah, through the chair, just that would have been one-time funding. Every board across the province who submitted their enrollments and based their budget on those enrollments, we're seeing a significant decrease in enrollment across the boards. So the ministry recognized this and provided funding up to our projected enrollment at that time. So that was one-time funding.
Okay, great. Thank you. And through the chair, I'm now on page 21 of the report, and the focus on youth. And I noticed last year there was no funding for focus on youth. It was incredibly important funding that served to subsidize youth employment and programs designed to support youth and encourage youth and keep them busy and out of trouble and learning new skills and learning. So is there any talk about this funding being returned?
For you, Madam Chair, this is just because this hasn't been announced for this year yet. At the time of us preparing this report, we do fully expect it to come back this year. But again, as we said, the top of this, what I used to call the PPS, but they're the responsive education programs. Some of the grants aren't announced at the time we do this publication, and that's one of the grants that we haven't got our allocation for TDSB confirmed yet. So we would expect it to continue.
Thank you. I pivoted to page 24 of the report, 54 of the agenda, school generated funds. There's been substantial increase over time. Can someone remind, I'm sure, I suspect I've even asked before, but can someone remind me what these would be?
So you, Madam Chair, these are funds from both school generated funds that are fundraising done by the school itself, as well as what our school councils bring in. So those are what we combined in our financial statements is called school generated funds.
Sorry, is
extra large and up next. So on the scale, I have size extra large.
Through the chair, did we do this differently than in 2021? Is this do we account for this differently, or has the amount really increased tenfold in a short period of time, or have we accounted for this differently from an accounting perspective?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it's not. But if you remember, COVID was going on at that time, so the school generated funds activity will drop to basically zero, and you're seeing it come back to its normal levels now.
Okay, thank you. I'm subconsciously trying to move on beyond COVID, and it no longer stays top of mind, but I appreciate that a lot of these numbers go back to that time. I'm going to pivot through the chair to page 25 of the report, page 55 of the agenda. The trustee expenses went up on a higher percentage than I would have anticipated. Is there a reason for that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would think the only thing that would have gone up was the trustee services area, the salary increases that would have been related to Bill 124. But Cherie, if you can confirm, that's correct.
Yes, I'm checking the records. 1 second.
Salary?
Trustee services staff.
Okay.
Included in trustee.
Okay, that's great. That's helpful. Thank you. I knew I didn't get any, so I was a little curious about this. The line below it, the two lines below it, there's been significant reduction, and again, through the chair, in terms of the directors and supervisory officers and board administration. Can you talk about those reductions? And in an enterprise the size of $3.75 billion enterprise, can you share what those leadership and those administrative costs are in relationship to other entities of comparable size?
Through you, Madam Chair, at this time I would have to do some research to give a comprehensive answer on that, because we do believe that we are about 2.5% of our expenditure. You'll see it earlier in the chart, that's administrative, and we believe that's in line with most public sector administration areas. We have, as you know, through tight budget times, focused on reducing and keeping our board administrative costs as low as possible to support our schools and students as much as we can. But I don't have comparative numbers over time at this point from other organizations to say how we are similar or differ.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, I guess the last, like, it's just so many of these were just unique things that didn't make sense to me. So on page 36 of the report, page 66 of the agenda, the average salary cost for ECEs went down, a little over $2,400, and that really just surprised me more than anything, and I don't understand how that would have happened. So is there something unique that's driving that, or?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would refer to Cherie if this was a change in the grid for ECEs that made it come down. I would note, as Cherie probably researches it, that again, you can see that it was typically around $49 million. It went up to 58 because of Bill 124. And I believe there may be some impacts on Bill 124 going forward. But Cherie, if you would like to answer that.
Yes, the cost was higher in 23-24 due to the retro adjustments. The rate moving forward from 24-25 is the current collective agreement rates are reflected, so it's lower than 23-24.
This is one of the challenges through you, Madam Chair, is that because of the timing of the Bill 124 and some collective agreements renegotiations, you're seeing the blip in 23-24, and you're seeing the longer term revised salary grids in 24-25, and so that big retro in 23-24 is cause of some of these variances you're seeing.
Okay, thank you, and I share the appreciation through the chair of my colleagues for all the extensive work that goes by the team that goes into this report. and I expect to spend a lot of time with it over the next little while. So I thank everyone for their efforts. And with that, I will take the chair back. Thank you, Trustee Rajwani. And we will move to anybody else want to, before we go to round two, anybody have any questions? Hearing and seeing none, Trustee Lee.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the round two opportunity. On page 34, through you, Mr. Chair, to staff on the financial facts on supply staff cost. It seems we went down significantly year over year, and then versus the COVID years. Is that number? How much of that number is real in terms of our improvements in supply cost reduction?
So through you, Mr. Chair, when the pandemic was on, supply costs did drop to significantly. You see the end of that in the 2021 numbers you're seeing there. We are, as to what Associate Director Zucker said earlier, in our first quarter report to you and our revised estimates, we've achieved 6.8 of the 10.5 savings target that we have for this year. We'll be soon after the second quarter bringing you a revised update and projection to year end. We are seeing positive changes, I would say, slowly in supply costs, and are hopeful that with the work of our executive officer, Ellis, and people and culture, we'll see further improvement there.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I think the number you gave us is 6.8. I assume that's in millions. I'm seeing a $45 million year-over-year drop. So what's the other ones? I
again,
know that there's a retroactive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, again, exactly, Trustee Lee. This is again the Bill 124 is making it difficult to do comparatives on the surface because of that huge amount that was put into 23-24.
But even if I compare, through Mr. Chair, to 2020-23, and knowing that the 24-25 numbers still have some of the retroactive impacts to it, that's a $9 million drop already.
And again, through you, Mr. Chair, again, realize too that the rates now have increased for our now. And so again, it's difficult to do that comparison because again, we're doing revised estimates right now where you're seeing actuals for a full year. And we're saying that we're projecting right now positive. At the year end, you'll see the financials and you'll be better informed.
Okay, I'm just saying you're probably, it looks like you're more positive than you're claiming you're claiming your achievements on. I just wanted to make sure I understand what the other ones are. But what you're saying is that this 122 could potentially go up.
Yes, I mean we still have. It was early again data we're pulling, but we are still seeing that we are hitting the 6.8, 6.7, and when we do our second quarter report, we also project a year and we'll give you an updated number as how we're progressing.
But the 6.7 gets you to 122.7, right?
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
On page 34, the total supply cost.
Yeah, 6.7 we get to 111 point. Well, 112, yeah.
Huh?
Well, I was assuming what you were asking, Trustee Lee, was that the 105,707, if you add the 6.8 into it, it would bring you to 112 million and change.
No, sorry, I was thinking with the $6.7 million in improvements, you get to 105,707 or 122,700, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay. So you're saying that number could, so against that, my question stands, because if you think that 122 is with the 6.7 improvement already in, but you are $9 million higher, $8 million better than 2022-23, and this 122 has a portion of that bill 120 something in it, shouldn't that mean that you've actually done better to reduce supply costs than what you're taking credits for?
Again, I hesitant to be absolute in terms because we're in the middle of a year and the trends and what can change. But again, at this point, we believe we crystallize, well, I should say crystallize, but we have achieved at this point 6.7. And I mean, we could have a higher incidence and we may only achieve 5, or we could have a better and we could achieve 8. So that's the challenge going forward.
Okay, all good. Well, all good. All in all, this is really job well done. Thank you to everyone on the team who contributed to it. The other question I had, and I wish I took more notes. Okay, is, sorry, just give me 1 second. When it comes to, oh gosh, sorry, I'm looking for it in my notes. Just give me 2 seconds. Yes, when it comes to school budget, when the schools buy a device, do that go into the amortization schedule as well that we talked about before?
It would depend, through you, Madam Chair, or sorry, Mr. Chair, it would depend on the value of they did. I forget the threshold for capitalization. So Cherie, if you could comment on that, but it would depend on the value.
Okay, so if it, okay, that's fine. I don't need to know the threshold. No, I just need to know there's a threshold. And the last question is on page 38. There's a nice chart on provincial funding versus TDSB staffing costs. I'm really confused by what I'm seeing. There's a bold line that says TDSB average PMVPs. Are the lines above that a breakdown of what that bold line is, or is that not a breakdown?
Sorry, page 38, you said?
Correct.
Sorry, and on page, sorry, I'm just on page 38 now. What was, sorry, one more time, Trustee Lee?
Yeah, the provincial funding versus TDSB staffing cost chart, the chart on the bottom. Yeah. There's a bold line that says TDSB average for PMVPs, and then there are 4 lines above that for provincial. How do I read this?
So what we're saying is in these lines is the funding benchmark for principals, elementary and secondary. As you may be aware, they have now given a common grid for principals and vice principals in their new collective agreement, or a memorandum of understanding. It's not a collective agreement. And the same for elementary principals and vice principals. They are on the same grid now. There's not a secondary and elementary grid any longer. So you're seeing what the grid is, and we are being fully funded for this new grid starting in 23-24, because it was retroactive to that period. And that's what you're seeing in this chart, is our costs are the same as the funding, where in the previous years you saw a difference between panels for what the funding amounts were.
I'm sorry, so the point that you're trying to make is we're now okay on that funding?
Yeah, so what the top part of the chart, the first 4 lines show you the funding levels for the principals and vice principals. The bolded area is the average cost for all our VPs and Ps. We didn't separate out the cost by as detailed as the funding, so we're just showing the average cost. For example, in 24-25 is 165,865 for our Ps and VPs.
Then wouldn't that mean that we're still underfunded, because there's no way that those numbers under section average to 165 or blended average to our average number?
Let us take this away. I'm sorry. I'm remote. I don't have access to all my files. We can take that back and answer that for you.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. It'd be good to know what that actually funding gap is, because it looks like there still is one.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's all. Appreciate it, Chair, and also to staff once again.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. And seeing no one further on the speakers list, I'm going to need a mover and a seconder for receipt of this document, please.
Trustee Rajwani.
Trustee Earhart's also happy to second.
Trustee Rajwani will move. Trustee Earhart will second. Thank you, ladies. Can we open the vote, please?
Lee in favor.
Shan in favor.
Rajwani in favor.
Patel in favor.
And that carries. The next item is item 4.4, which is budget consultation schedule, which is on page 87 of the agenda. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair. We are bringing this report to trustees this evening in order for trustees to have an opportunity to see the planned consultation with the public for this budget schedule or budget process, sorry, and to give trustees an opportunity to comment and make any suggestions. If I know we've talked about this previously, so just for trustees' awareness, there is still obviously the way that we usually communicate with SEAC and PEAC. We get input from those two advisory committees. Like last year, we received input from Student Senate as well. And then we are looking at 3 town halls to be held across the city, 2 in person and 1 hybrid, so an in-person and remote opportunity. The dates that you see here, after discussion with the chair of the committee, we are thinking that it would be more appropriate. There would be more information available. We should have access to the grants. If we look at a period in April, so we're looking at around the April 14th timeframe. In addition, that gives anybody who's celebrating Ramadan as well an opportunity to be able to take part in the consultations. So again, this is for receipt. These were our recommended dates, but we are looking at 1 location in the east, 1 location in the west, and then 1 here at 50/50 that would be hybrid in order to be able to provide information and get feedback from the public. In addition, we are looking at a survey that would allow trustees and staff to get information from the public on their priorities that will help us to make some potentially difficult decisions that we will have to make through this budget process. So again, we are open to feedback. We do believe that it's really important to do some in-person consultation and allow people the opportunity to hear and to provide feedback. At the same time, just like in previous years, if there's an additional consultation that's required after a substantially challenging period, we as staff would be open to additional consultation. What we would also like to put in trustees' minds is that we will have an FBAC meeting on April 30th, and we are looking at potentially scheduling time to hear delegations on the 28th if we know that there will be significant delegations for that meeting. So just having that scheduled would be helpful in the planning moving forward. So again, open to any feedback from trustees.
Thank you. And Trustee Earhart.
Thank you very much. And through the chair, thanks very much for setting this out. So a few things. I was very much interested in having a fully virtual meeting. And so wanted to offer that as input, though I know time is always tight. I was also very happy to see a survey being offered, and thought as late into mid-April as possible could be helpful. And in terms of the dates for the town halls, it looks here like they're all being proposed for that last week of March. I am wondering, just given we're on the day of an election, that we could be that it could be that there would be, I could imagine, that a newer returning government may need some time. And so we always wait with great interest here for the government's announcements of funding levels and funding methodology, as they did completely change it last year as well. And so I'm wondering if we may want to have some public meetings that we anticipate would be coming after that to be able to digest what that is and what it means for where we're at as well. Just putting that out there, or as it, yeah, I just feel like it feels very early, given that we're likely to not receive information until later potentially this year. And so I'd be grateful for staff perspectives on that and other trustees in terms of how to sequence how to have these discussions. And thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair, appreciate your feedback. And I think it's similar to the conversation that the chair of APBEC and I had about potentially moving these dates to later in April in order for exactly what you said, to one, get a feel for where we're going to be. Provincially, we may have the core education funding by then. We hope to have the core education funding by then. And it may be more beneficial and useful for the public to have more relevant information. So we are looking at that week of April 14th. Again, trying to look at the trustee schedules as well as staff schedules in order to get input in a timely manner, but also ensure that we have the right information to be able to provide to the public so that we can get relevant feedback.
And it's also worth noting, I'll just follow up a little bit on that, that we also have talked about the fact that in the past, we have also gone back a second time and had some public meetings in May, for example, to discuss with the public further discussions or more centered discussions about the difficult choices that may lie ahead. So these aren't necessarily the only dates that will be considered and the only consultation we'll do. So there may be opportunities later. And I will also follow up that Associate Director Zucker mentioned the 28th. Last year, if you'll remember, the volume suggested that we needed 2 nights for it. So if you're tentatively blocking your calendars, you may want to do the same with the 29th as well, because depending on the delegations we get, it's conceivable we would have to go 2 nights. And in the event we have that volume, like we have had in past years, we won't approach it the way we did last year and have a marathon night and a smaller. The second night was rather short. We will endeavor, once we get to a certain limit, to split it so that we have 2 more reasonable sessions, which are easier on staff and trustees that attend, but also fairer to the delegates who don't have to sit around for 5 hours to wait to get an opportunity for their 3 or 4 minutes. So we'll try to be fair around that. And if we need the second night, we will do that. But we're thinking about the 28th for sure, and tentatively the 29th. So trustees could be aware. Did you have anything further, Trustee Earhart?
Thanks very much. That's very helpful. And just to clarify, it was May 28th, 29th for the delegations, just to make sure we heard that correct. Thank you.
No, April 28th and 29th. The May reference was to the, and I apologize if I confused, the May reference was just potential, a second round of consultations if the board thought that we just made room for the possibility. We're just kind of mapping out tentative timelines, and that the April consultation in and itself doesn't necessarily have to be the last time we would have them.
Okay, thank you very much. I note that the week of April 14th, I believe, is Passover. And so just to consider that, I know scheduling is always challenging. And I just, for final feedback, I note it, as a busy parent, I do always find it helpful when we post the presentations and copies of a video for the virtual meetings in particular after the fact. That way, some have the ability to watch after if they're not able to attend in the moment. And so would also offer that as input for some of these as well. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And I'm seeing shaking heads, so that has been noted, and we'll endeavor to deliver on that. And seeing no one else on the speakers list, I'll need a mover and seconder for movement of receipt for this, please.
Happy to move for receipt with comments. Oh, and
Trustee Earhart will move. Trustee Shan will second. Thank you both. Please open the vote.
Lee's in favor.
Shan in favor.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Patel in favor.
And that carries. Our next item on the agenda is our staff report, is item 4.5, the 2025-2026 financial forecast, which is on page 91 of the agenda. Associate Director Zucker.
Thank you, and through the chair, happy to bring this forward as our, not so happy, but I'm bringing this forward as a projected financial position. There is a PowerPoint, and Governance Services will send it out to everybody, and you should also be able to see it on your screen, so I'm not sure. There it is. If I just say things, it appears, so I appreciate that. With regards to our 25-26 budget schedule, it's just a reminder of sort of the timelines and where we are. So this is the first, major report that we are bringing forward with regards to the 25-26 budget process. And so you will see that on March 4th, we will receive the school-based staffing report. We will also have our options to balance at the end of March. The consultation will take place through March and April and possibly beyond. We do expect to receive the core education funding update and financial position on April 30th. We would expect a draft budget in May based on all the feedback that we receive, and then approval of the final budget in June. So again, on the continuum of the budget process, this is similar to the processes that we followed in the past. It lines up with the schedule that trustees were provided with in October. And again, this is really one of the first major steps. And so I'm going to go through, first of all, just a reminder of where we are currently. So as we indicated in the previous report, we currently have a $28 million deficit. We're technically still awaiting approval from the ministry of this deficit and our ability to use proceeds of disposition, although we were provided with some assurance that we could use proceeds. We haven't officially received that approval yet from the ministry. We do have a deficit recovery plan, which trustees saw in August, and it was a plan to get to an $11 million deficit for 25-26. The commitment to reducing spending in areas outside of our core mandate, and included in the letter that we received from the province, there was a commitment to reduce staffing from one-time funding. Their quote is that it would end unless there is an offset to support the sustainable continuation of those additional positions. In addition, as we all know, we received the Auditor General Performance Audit results, and in that, the ministry, the Auditor General did recognize that TDSB does have a structural deficit, that some things are within our control, some things are not within our control. and that there was a recommendation that the board and the ministry work together to review the structural deficit to determine which areas that we each have responsibility for and how we are going to work together to bring TDSB to a balanced position. So again, we do have a structural deficit, meaning our planned spending is more than our expected revenue. And in some cases, we are choosing to spend more in certain areas than we receive funding for, again, based on our priorities. And in some cases, TDSB is not fully funded for some areas, including statutory benefits, our teacher salary versus funding, sick leave, and inflation versus funding. Some of our, even though 80% of our operating budget relates to staffing, and therefore the funding that we receive is usually in line with the projected increases that the ministry provides in grants. However, the remaining 20% of our budget is significantly, in fact, impacted by inflation or contractual obligations, which our vendors have considered inflation, and the funding has not kept up with these inflationary increases. Also, we do have excess capacity or underutilized schools, and we've talked about this for a number of years, where until the moratorium is lifted and we have the ability to close schools, we will continue to pay more for the space that we have. We have too much space, and the funding will remain the same or decrease as our enrollment decreases. For 25-26 in particular, declining enrollment, so we do expect a slight decrease in enrollment, but any decrease in enrollment means a decrease in funding. We do expect an increase in facility costs, and we will talk a little bit about the why later on in the presentation. We are spending in areas that are not funded, and we are underfunded. And those are two very different things, again, referring to where we choose to spend based on our priorities versus spending that we can't control and we don't receive enough funding for. We will have inflationary and contractual obligations. So anytime that we have a contract, and transportation is a good example, when we sign a multi-year contract, there are increases built into the contract, and therefore we have obligations under those contracts, and we will see our expenditures increase without any changes in service. The impact of Bill 124, I know it's complicated. There were retro payments and that do 23-24 numbers a little bit escalated than in comparison to prior years, but there is a future impact of Bill 124, and that includes our current salaries because those salaries have increased. And that includes, say, non-union salaries for which funding hasn't significantly changed. And it also impacts our employee future benefits. So things that we pay out now or in the future will be impacted by the current salaries or the increase in salaries as a result of Bill 124. We are also seeing an impact of federal immigration changes on international students. And so although the international student revenue is expected, the calculation from the Education Act is based on a break-even or a cost recovery method, we are still seeing a significant reduction in the number of international students that we, compared to what we were expecting before these changes were in place. So I'm going to go through each of the areas that are impacted by the projections and the assumptions that we've made. The first being the changes in core education. Again, we do expect a decline in enrollment. And we also have an assumption based on direction from the ministry of no significant changes in the core education funding, meaning we don't expect any significant decreases, but we certainly don't expect any significant increases. And that's what we were told for planning purposes, was to expect minimal changes. So because of our declining enrollment, we are expecting a decrease after taking everything into account of approximately $1 million over last year or from last year. I want to take just 1 second to really compliment the budget staff. If trustees will recall last year, after they had done this calculation for our core education funding, they were within $1 million after we took into account that the $11 million surprise that we got from the ministry. So our staff do an incredible job of projecting our funding based on the assumptions that they make, and that we work with the ministry to ensure that we have the best assumptions when we're doing these calculations. So again, based on our experience and based on the staff work, I wouldn't expect significant surprises, positive or negative, with reference to the core education funding that has been projected. As I mentioned, for international students, we're not planning on changing any fees, but we do, and even though there's nothing specific that relates to international students that are in elementary or secondary schools, the international students that you hear about in the reforms are more related to post-secondary. The government changes are having an impact on the number of students that we have. In this current year, we have 228 less students than we had in the original budget. And that change was made at the revised estimates. But we are hearing that even when students have registered with us, pay their deposit, and have full intentions of coming, they aren't actually getting their permits or their visas in order to be able to come. So that means that we are having to refund that money, and we're not seeing those students. So that's the impact that we're seeing, is that there are certainly less approvals that are happening for students that have registered with TDSB. In addition, based on our current enrollments, so we are starting to have enrollments now for next year. Our projection is expected to decrease by a further 126 students. So we have a decrease of approximately 350 students from last year's budget, and that results in about a $6 million decrease in revenue. Language instruction for newcomers to Canada, or LINK revenue. We all know that the cuts have already been made to federal immigration settlement funding, and that has resulted in decreased funding for us. And we know that we have had to close 5 of our 12 sites for the LINK program. This has resulted in a negative impact on our budget, moving forward, of about $1.5 million, meaning that the revenue has decreased by about $6 million, but our expenditures have only gone down by about $4.5 million. And that has to do with the fact that LINK sometimes it does cover some of our administrative expenses. For example, it covers some of our accounts payable or admissions departments, that sort of thing. So we will not be able to recover with a reduction in costs, the total reduction in revenue to the tune of about $1.5 million. Interest revenue is another area where interest revenue in 24-25 was higher than it has been in prior years, mostly due to the increased interest rates that we had seen in 24-25 and the amount of cash that we have on hand as a result of us receiving funding for, say, retro payments that we got a little bit ahead of time of paying them out. Also, for capital, we are spending more than we receive in funding. So any funding that we had received is now being used more quickly than the current year funding. So what we're seeing in 25-26 is interest rates having decreased from last year and continuing with an expectation of decreasing. Plus our cash on hand is decreasing, and therefore both of those have resulted in a decrease in revenue from our budget last year of about $5 million. We have implemented the IB fees for 25-26, so we are expecting an increase in revenue there to offset the costs of IB. And then we also have a reduction of one-time funding. Last year, the 2021 census was any of our grants that are based on census information were updated from using the 2015 census to the 2021 census. There's one sort of pot of money that the province allocates across the province, and our proportionate share of that pot decreased as a result of the change in the years in the census information. So we received $3.2 million less in funding last year than in previous years as a result of the change in the census. At the time, the ministry said, well, you know, we haven't really given you enough time to make the changes that you require in order to offset that decrease in revenue. So they gave boards a one-time supplement in the amount of that we lost. So we lost $3.2 million in revenue last year as a result of this. The ministry gave us a one-time funding of $3.2 million to offset that loss. They did say that it was one time, and therefore we are not expecting that funding again next year. So when we look at our changes in revenue, again, our core education, we expect it to be decreasing by about $1 million. International students, $6 million. Our link revenue, the net change on the net impact on the budget is $1.5 million. Our interest revenue is going to go down $5 million. Our IB fees are up $1 million, and then that census adjustment is down 3.2 for a total impact on our revenues of $15.7 million. When we look at our salary and benefits expenditures, again, we have decreased enrollment, and that results in a decrease in school-based staffing because it's based on class size and other allocation parameters. So our school-based staffing report will be presented on Tuesday, and trustees at that time will be asked to approve it, and more information will certainly be provided about school-based staffing. Our salary increases are not included in the projection right now because we've not included the funding related to the increase in salaries, so we expect those to offset each other. Benefits have been adjusted for known increases, so if we know that CPP is increasing, for example, that has been taken into account, and there are no other significant changes to salaries or benefits. So that has resulted in a little bit of a savings again because our enrollment's down, so school-based staffing is down. For our employee future benefits, this is the calculation of the amount for employee future benefits is based on an actuary report. They do this calculation for us every 3 years, and then we use an estimate in the periods between those 3 years. So we are on course for a full evaluation this year. And we do expect it to increase due to usage. For example, our WSIB usage is increasing. Bill 124 has caused an increase in salaries, and then interest rates impact actuarial calculations. So for those reasons, we are expecting a fairly significant increase in employee future benefits. The other employee future benefit number is our retirement gratuity liability. And this is another accounting calculation, but each year there's an amortization amount of $22.8 million that has been expensed, and that's been over the last 10 years or so. And so although we don't actually expend or pay cash of $22.8 million, it is still a budget amount in our books. So when we budget, we have to budget that $22.8 million. Well, in 25-26, there will only be $13.8 million left to amortize. So our expenditure next year will be $13.7 million, and that will result in a savings of $9.1 million. And then in 2026-27, There'll be a further $13.7 million in savings. So that 22.8 will eventually come back into the board's budget, and we will be able to use it to offset our expenditures. And that is, again, the expectation of the ministry through the deficit recovery plan, so that we will be able to, again, help assist in balancing our budget using that 22.8. So 9.1 in 25-26, and then a further 13.7 in 26-27. The replacement cost for absenteeism, as we heard, the original targeted savings was $7 million, and then we added an additional 3.5 million savings for a total savings of 10.5 million. At the revised estimates, our actual experience resulted in projected savings of 6.8 million, again, versus the 10.5 million. And then because of the attendance management program that we are putting in place, and because of the work that is happening within people and culture, we are projecting an additional savings of another $5 million next year for a total savings of 11.8. So it's the 6.8 plus the 5. And that is $1.3 million additional savings from our original budget of 10.5. So that's where the 1.3 comes into place. It's our actual savings compared to a projected increase of another 5 million for next year. So for salaries and benefits, there is a savings of 11.7 million. Our employee future benefits, we expect to have an impact of an increase in expenditures of 15.9 million. Our replacement cost for absenteeism, a savings of 1.3 million. And the amortization of the employee future benefits, a savings of 9.1 million. So a total savings in salaries and benefits overall of 6.2 million. When we look at our other expenditures, these are the ones that are really impacted by inflation and our contractual obligations. So for utilities, we expect inflation increases of about 4 million for next year. In addition, our revised estimates in the current year included a carbon tax of 2.1 million, and we're expecting another 2.1 million for 25-26 on top of that, so 4.2 in total. So our expected increase in utilities for next year is $8.2 million. For transportation, we have contractual and inflationary increases of 6.7 million, both based on the contract and then inflationary increases in other areas. And then for the rest of the remainder of the budget, we are expecting inflationary increases in different supplies.
उसी तरफ मेरी तो TDSB की meeting भी चल रही है. Hold on.
Trustee Patel, can I ask
Sorry,
you to
sorry, Chair.
So other contractual increases in various departments, it's about 5.8 million additional cost. Maintenance is an area where we are having some significant challenges, and the cost for maintenance continues to increase for a number of reasons. Again, inflation is easy to understand. Inflationary costs for cleaning supplies, for toilet paper, for all of the supplies that we use in order to maintain our schools. There's certainly an inflationary increase there. We also our maintenance expense is impacted by vacancies and absences, resulting in us using overtime for our existing caretakers in order to do this work, or third parties being used. When we use third parties, we're obviously paying the third party cost, and then we do pay a percentage to the unions for using that third party. We do have older buildings with increasing costs. And, if you have I liken it to if you have a brand new house versus a 60-year-old house, there's going to be more costs associated with maintaining that older house. And as the house gets older, costs will continue to increase and different things will require additional maintenance. So as our buildings get older, as our schools get older, we are seeing increased costs associated with maintaining them. Our enrollment is decreasing, but our space is staying the same. And we talked about this. This is a result of not being able to close schools. So we have decreased funding because of decreased enrollment, but our costs are remaining the same or increasing with inflation. And that is due to the inability to deal with excess capacity as a result of the moratorium. So when we look at our changes in other expenses due to inflation or contractual obligations, we're seeing an increase in utility costs of 8.2, an increase in maintenance costs of 12.7, an increase in transportation of 6.7, and an increase in other areas of 5.8. So you can see that very in contradiction to the decrease in salaries and benefits as a result of decreased enrollment, that decreased enrollment is not impacting, in fact, has a very little impact on the other expenditures where we're really dealing with significant inflationary increases. And we are expecting an increase of 33.4 million. So what does that mean for the bottom line? If we look at our projected deficit of 28 million for 24-25, we have revenue decreasing of 15.7 million. We have a savings in salaries and benefits of 6.2 million. And then we have inflationary or contractual obligation decreases of 33.4 million. We did, as part of the original the deficit recovery plan, commit to operating savings of 5 million. And you'll see in the next report, we have already identified approximately half of that 5 million, including the changes to permit fees and general interest courses. And so all of that together, we are projecting a deficit position of 65.9 million. So our next steps, really, staff is looking at our potential options for budget savings, and we are working with the ministry as recommended by the Auditor General. Our school-based staffing approval is happening next week. The budget consultation will be an important piece, not only to get the feedback from the public, but to also provide the public with the information, making sure that they understand our financial position, understand why we're in the situation that we're in, and prepare them for any changes that we may need to make. And then we do expect to receive the core education funding likely at the beginning of April. And again, it will be helpful to have that document and to know what our actual revenue is going to be. But through the amazing work of staff, we don't expect significant changes here. So with that, I will turn it back to the chair for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Associate Director Zucker, for the very thorough presentation. Trustee Laskin.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. So a couple of things. I think it's going to be really important, especially after the Auditor General report that confirmed the structural deficit, that we are crystal clear in terms of what expenditures above the funding we receive are not of our own decision-making. For example, the things like inflation, the benefit costs, the salary gaps that have been with us since prior to amalgamation, when our employees were always paid more. So we will never catch up, things we will never catch up in. And differentiate that from areas that the board makes its decisions on how it spends its money that contribute to the deficit. For example, special education, things that directly support schools. Because, you know, that I guess I'm of the opinion we can't cut ourselves out of this budget deficit. And unless the province actually recognizes the structural deficit and how their decision-making, for example, the moratorium on school closures, has caused us to continue spending money in ways that don't directly support, you know, a balanced budget.
we won't be able to, we won't be able to make our points to the public, and we need the public with us. So that's why I mentioned it in the financial facts, and that's why I mention it now, because I'm not 100% clear, and I know the numbers fairly well. I'm still not 100% clear of the amount of money. I guess my assumption is if they actually provided us with the money that we have no control over, we not only would we not be in a deficit position, but we would in fact be able to reinvest in human resources and programs for kids. So that's my first point. So through you, Mr. Chair, do you know when that differentiation could be provided to trustees?
So thank you. And through the chair, the intention is that that will come at the end of March when we next report to the board about our financial position.
Thank you very much. So that's my first point. My second point is I noted the assumptions in the report were, and you mentioned it clearly, potentially there's government direction to fund our schools at the level of staffing that they provide us. I firmly believe, based upon my experience in the 33 schools that I'm privileged to represent, we cannot do that. We need additional vice principals. We need additional community youth workers. We need additional safety monitors, to name a few. So I'm not a member of this committee, but I'm asking colleagues to consider asking staff to fund at the same level as last year. And I think that's an important message going into staffing, because frankly, and I know this probably sounds absurd, between a $70 million deficit and an $80 million deficit, again, we're not going to get there through conventional methods. My second point is we have always tried the best we could to protect our schools. And in order to do that, we have cut central staffing. And I would argue we are not functioning as well as we could because we simply don't have enough central staff to support the business operations and our schools. So the other consideration I would like, and it's not for tonight or tomorrow or the end of March or whatever, but I would like the director, especially because he's new and especially because he brings a perspective, not only from school board experience, but from ministry experience in terms of operations, to suggest to us areas outside of the schools, but within the operations that need an input. And I'm talking not only an input of people, but an input of money. And I know my time is up, but I'll just finish. The money on systems, like we need new systems in order to do the work, whether it's case management systems or other kind of systems. So it's a combination of money for people and potentially money for supports for the people. And I'll stop there, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Trustee Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does my volume work? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I just changed devices. I just want to follow on for you, Mr. Chair. I want to follow on Trustee Laskin's question for staff. And I want to be a bit more prescriptive on, I think, what will help the board understand what the situation is. Just because, $60 million deficit is over 500 staff member headcounts. And I don't think any member of the PDSB board has enough knowledge on where to find 550 staff headcounts to cut. Right? Like, we're not going to be able to make that decision. So I think it'll be helpful for us to have a very simple chart. And I know I'm not supposed to present stuff, but just for the sake of clarity, I'll link it into the meeting chat. I'd like to know what the mandatory OPEX funding is and what's the actual expenditure that we incur is, what the facilities upkeep funding we get is, what is the actuals that we incur, and what the discretionary OPEX portion of the funding is. And when I say discretionary, I mean, you know, there is a portion of the GSN that's meant to give us room on what we spend our money. I'd like to get and also a delta between the funding and the OPEX. Right now I don't have a picture on what we actually have control over. For example, if we cut all the things that we're doing, do we even get to a balanced budget? I don't know that answer. Right? And if we cut all the things we're doing, is that equitable when compared to other boards? So I think that that'll be very helpful. So my questions for you, Mr. Chair, to staff is: do you need a motion to produce something like this, or can you just do it?
Through the chair, I believe what you've put in there is something that we have sort of looked at before. I think last year when we provided it for trustees, it was it looked like a student with a backpack on it, and it had sort of the percentage that we spent in each area. And to that point, less than 2% of our budget is discretionary, which is less than 2% of our budget is about $60 million. And so and by discretionary, you know, we're talking about supplies, we're talking about like computers and things that people do need to do, paper. We're talking about professional development. So when we talk about discretionary, there's still an amount that we have to spend. And so I do believe that even if we were to cut out all of our discretionary expenditures, we would still be in the position that we're in. And I just want to highlight too, I know we had a question earlier about our administration and the percentage that we spend on administration. If you look at sort of functioning not-for-profits, larger not-for-profits, about 5% is sort of the minimum that they're spending on administration. And our percentage is about 2.5%. So again, we're as lean as we can be, I would say, at the center with our administration and governance and our discretionary spending. I mean, there's always room to save, you know, a smaller percentage, but it still will not get us to balance. It's somewhere where we look every year and we continue to go back to our departments to say, can you reduce this by a little bit more, a little bit more? I wanted to provide all of that context, but to assure Trustee Lee that we will be able to provide that information, and a motion isn't necessary. It will certainly be part of the information that we bring to trustees to help trustees and the public have a better understanding of our budget position and you know, where we would need to look in order to balance the budget.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair, and I fully understand your comments, Associate Director. My intention isn't to ask staff to cut all discretionary expenditures, and feel free to rename that category to, you know, whatever you feel necessary, right? So, you know, mandatory upkeep or required upkeep or required overhead, however you want to name that. I think it'll be helpful for the board to have those categories on the funding dollar amount and an actual dollar amount, and a variance between the two, because I think it'll be fairly obvious where the issue lies. And if we have to have a very unhappy conversation with other stakeholders, I think this would become a very simple way for us, for the public, and for everyone watching to understand, right? Just, I understand what you're saying, but I also recognize that I actually understand the numbers possibly better than most other people in the public who will be looking at this, but they will definitely be a part of the conversation. So I think that would be really helpful. And the second question is, let's say we have to close the $60 million gap. Staff, how do you recommend we do
Yeah, I didn't get it. Can you repeat that, Trustee Lee?
Yeah, my question once again through your chair is, if we have to close the $60 million gap, what would staff's recommendation be for us to do this?
So through the chair, that is what staff is working on right now. We are, like I said, we've turned over the rocks that are obvious. We've gone to our central departments over and over again. So that list that we provide of areas where we spend more than we receive funding for is where we will be looking. In addition, I think it's really important for us to recognize that the Auditor General didn't just say it's up to TDSB to fix our structural deficit. The Auditor General actually said to work with the ministry. So it really is important that we continue to have those conversations with the ministry to identify areas that are unique to TDSB. And the only way that I think that we will be able to get to a balanced budget is if we work together with the ministry. And we certainly have some areas that we will be proposing that we look at that are outside of the K-12 core education, but we also will be looking to the ministry to assist in closing that gap.
And through you, Mr. Chair, my only comment is, if the average, for example, admin cost ratio is 5% and we're already at 2.5, I think we need to stop cutting like less than 5, right? So let's not push our staff numbers harder just because we can. Let's be reasonable at one point. Right? Our admin staff, a lot of them don't have unions representing them, but it doesn't mean their interests should stretch further. My other question is, we talked about charging potentially some money for our one-to-one device program. And I think we moved motions asking staff for plans in the report. Can I just ask through Mr. Chair where that is?
Mr. Chair, through you, Trustee Lee, it's a little bit difficult to hear you. Could you please repeat that last question?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, we have talked about charging some money for a student one-to-one device program. Can I just ask staff to let us know where the plans for that?
Through the chair, staff is working right now on a proposal for trustees with regards to the one-to-one program, trying to use as much data as we can to support the proposal. And so you will see that coming back through trustees, likely to the program, because this would be a program-related decision, so to PSSP, but it would have a budget implication. And when we talk about the budget implication, I think that that's at FBEC where we need to consider the impact of fees to parents to support. So through the chair, all that to say is it's in the works and it's being considered.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I appreciate staff's efforts, and I don't look forward to this conversation, but we will have it if we, no, and we'll do it. We'll do our community and students, right, and also our staff.
Okay. Thank you. Did you have anything further? Does that conclude yours, Trustee Lee?
Those are all my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Earhart.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments of other trustees so far, because I do feel like I'm hard pressed to determine what we could do as a board in this instance. And I came into this conversation trying to understand, well, what has happened. So since being elected since 2022 and listening to our FBEC reports, I thought things would be better now, at least a little bit better, given the cuts that have been made to better, even if I didn't support them, to that that better align to what the province is funding. But we are still in this situation because costs continue to go up because of structural matters. The regulation that prevents us from consolidating in places that would better serve students, as I understand it, but also just the basic costs of doing work like utilities at this point. And so at least that's what I'm interpreting. And I would say it would be very helpful to get from staff as we continue this dialogue support for how best to explain this, because when I see it, it doesn't feel as straightforward as some of the previous discussions that we have had as a board around the deficit position, for example, when COVID supports were removed. So that would be my feedback to offer. I did want to move a motion on Trustee Laskin's behalf. I don't know if this is the time for it. I don't know where we are on the speakers list. Is it the appropriate time?
No, Trustee Earhart, we will deal with the matter, and then after we've dealt with it, and we've voted to hopefully we voted to receive the report. At that time, we will deal with the business arising motion.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll just I wonder if staff have any response or comments to my initial comments, and thanks so much.
Thank you, and through the chair, appreciate the feedback. It is a little bit more challenging. I would say that, when we look at what we're seeing tonight, taking salaries and benefits out of the mix, because again, for the most part, we've got the gap that continues to happen, but as salaries increase, our funding increases as well. So what we're really seeing is that the impact of not being able to close schools and the impact of inflation and contractual obligations that we have, which again is also due to inflation, are not being funded at the rate that they're increasing. So I would say that that's the biggest change that you're seeing this year. So when we look at where we were last year with a $28 million deficit and why we're actually in a worse off position this year, there's really, three reasons. One is declining enrollment, one is inflation, and one has to do with regulations which are impacting us either in our ability to close schools, in reductions in international students. So again, all three of those things for the most part are out of our control, right? And can't always be anticipated year over year.
Thank you. That's helpful to hear, even if it doesn't help me get to where I feel I need to be as a trustee to articulate this in a way for a broader public. I will say I observe, we're 5 years after the declaration of COVID emergencies within just a few days. And that was an unprecedented emergency. And I do know with what we are facing in terms of economic uncertainty, we are also in unprecedented times. And just as supports are needed to private sector, to individuals, support will also be needed for public sector services to continue in these times. And so I do hope that the base economics of service delivery is considered with any new or returning government in these unprecedented times. If one is not to increase the base funding for education, one should at minimum consider emergency funding given the situation that is being faced, not just by our board, but all boards and all public service delivery in the province. And so I'll get off my soapbox, but thank you very much for this presentation. And I'm very sorry that this is the situation we are faced with.
Yeah, thank you. And I will add just through the chair that we will work with communications in order to make a very complicated issue as simple as possible, because I think it really is important that we're able to explain to the public why we're in the situation that we're in. So appreciate the feedback.
Thank you. And my only other feedback for that would be to gain an understanding of how there is some elements that are unique to us, and there are some that may not be. And when it's not unique to us, how can we all work together to bring forward these matters? And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. I'm going to pass the chair to Trustee Rajwani. Are you able to accept the chair?
Yes.
Thank you. And I should go on record as thanking Trustee Rajwani for willing, so capably serving as vice chair tonight, particularly since I didn't ask her. So thank you very much for your efforts in that regard. And I also think it's worth noting that the moratorium has come up 5 times tonight, and without me mentioning it. Yeah, so that I think that alone is noteworthy. Before I borrow Trustee Earhart's soapbox and go on a little rant, I do this census review loss. Like, I'm not understanding. I appreciate there's a new census, but I'm not understanding how this relates to a loss in revenue to us. I'm not understanding how the head count and the process itself is detrimental to us.
So thank you, and through the chair. A lot of times when the ministry changes how their funding formula or the inputs that they use for the funding formula, they have one pot of money and then it's redistributed among school boards. And transportation is a good example where the transportation funding changed a number of years ago, and TDSB was actually one of the boards that received more funding than they had previously as a result of the change in the funding formula. So although I believe that if you would have asked anybody around this table, anybody in the city of Toronto, that if when we use this 2021 census compared to the 2015 census, would we be better off compared to the rest of the province, or the same or worse off? I don't think anybody would have said we would have been better off. I think that would just be sort of anecdotally how people were feeling. But what the data that is used from the 2021 census actually gave TDSB less of that pot of money than they previously had received compared to the other boards in the province. So some boards were boards that received more funding than they had previously. We were one of the boards that received less funding than they had previously. And so last year, the ministry provided us with some one-time funding to offset those costs. Very clearly indicated that this was one-time funding as a result of phasing this in. And so we're not expecting to receive that one-time funding. So that loss in funding will continue to apply as they continue to use the 2021 census information, but we won't have any supplemental funding to support us.
Okay, thank you. There's certain areas that we spend more money in, and special education is one. And, I quite frankly, I'm of the opinion that we don't spend enough on special education. I think the demands are such. So this whole, but fundamentally, I think this is as dramatic as these numbers are, and as problematic as this is, I think the solution isn't how we got here isn't as complicated as inflation existed in, for a number of years now. And the number of $1,500 is per student is what OPSPA calculates is, the inflation affected, the buying power has been reduced by about $1,500 per student of the money that is provided by the provincial government. Given that your math skills are better than mine, can you share what 1,500, what that would represent in terms of revenue?
Through the chair, $1,500 per student, and we have about 240,000 students, is about $360 million. And so certainly it's more than our deficit, but I think as was indicated by trustees earlier, there are areas that we need to increase spending in order to support students, whether it's literacy, numeracy, special education, all of those areas. The Auditor General indicated that we should be increasing mental health supports for students, that it's not keeping up with the need. So those are areas that, even though we have a $70 million deficit, we do and certainly would spend more than that $70 million deficit if we had the funding to be able to do so. And that way we would be able to support the multi-year strategic plan and to support students in the areas of the multi-year strategic plan.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, I got, and I suspect that most people that get into that seek the position of school board trustee do so out of a desire to collaborate with others and advance the educational experience of students in their particular school boards. And in this, 6+ years I've been here, we have, horrendous deficits year after year after year. And a government, we advocate and we make it really clear how we got here and how we're unique and how the decisions that they make negatively affect us in a manner that does not allow us to stay afloat. And, there's a lot of people who believe there's a crisis in education in terms of the in-school experience that's going on with teachers and students and frustration. And we're not in a position to help that or to help that in the manner that we would like. Anytime the government talks about education, they proudly crow about the increased investment that they make, and that's the end of their discussion. It's just a simple 3 lines about how no government has invested more in education than they have. And while that may be factually true, the buying power of what they're providing is hopelessly falling behind. And boards throughout the province, and ours in particular, are facing challenges that, we're at 65 and it's higher than our discretionary spend. It's getting to a really challenging point, and we're really thin, and there's going to be I'm not going to be voting in favor of cuts that get us to $68 or $65.9 million. And my time has run out. And with that, I'll take the chair back. Thank you, Trustee Rajwani. Seeing no one further on the speakers list, I need a mover and seconder for receipt, please.
Happy to move to receive.
I can second.
Moved by Trustee Earhart, seconded by Trustee Patel. Can we open the vote, please?
Just so you know, there's been deficits ever since 1998.
You're not helping. That doesn't help.
Just so you say, just in your.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Rajwani. Trustee Lee? And Trustee Patel?
Patel in favor.
Thank you, Trustee Patel. Trustee Lee?
Trustee Lee's in favor.
Thank you. And that passes. And with that, we do have a business arising motion that has been sent out to everybody. So I'm confirming that. Trustee Earhart and Trustee Rajwani are moving this on behalf of Trustee Laskin. I will ask Trustee Earhart if she'd like to speak to this.
Thank you. I'll just say quickly that the motion proposes that the additional staffing positions that were added to the 24-25 budget be built into the 25-26 projected financial forecast moving forward. And I think that this is an important starting position for us because that is where we currently are with that staffing. And so to start without that already sets the stage in a way that I don't think will help us through this discussion. And so I'm very hopeful that we can start this discussion with the true staffing position that we are at here tonight. And I also think it would be helpful to get a sense, as is articulated in the second part of this motion, around some of the central priority needs. It is an area that presents risk to the board as a whole. It also is an area where significant cuts were made last year, and I think we need to have a better sense of what is needed so that to support us in our decision making through this, as well as in our advocacy, because I already know right away that we need more safe and caring adults in schools. And I have a clear, as a trustee, I've gained a clear sense of that from our discussions, but I haven't gained as clear of a sense of what is needed in our central capacity. So I think this special report would be helpful, and I'm grateful to Trustee Laskin for her work.
Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Trustee Rajwani, did you want to speak to this?
No, I just
Okay.
think I'm just adding and echoing the work that's been put into this. And I think it's just helpful for us to be able to get ahead of this and have it within the forecasting tool so that we can look ahead and continue to have the sustainability and consistency as it relates to key staffing positions.
Okay, thank you. I must admit, though, after you started with no, I wasn't expecting the 3 sentences that followed, but that's probably just me. Thank you for that. Trustee Laskin is first on the list.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't think this motion will be a surprise to my colleagues because I've moved similar motions for the last number of years. I have, for me, this is just my personal opinion. When you have good administrators in your schools, you have a good system. And it's that principal position that supports teachers to do their best, that engages community, that embraces the diversity of students to make them feel that they belong. It's just critically important, and all my trustee colleagues, I think, will agree that if you have principals that manage their communities and embrace their communities, we have fewer phone calls from those communities. And that's just a bottom line. And I think you have
happier students and you have happier staff. So the issue of vice principals has always been critical for me. I wished we had the wherewithal to ensure that any single administrator could have some sort of collaborative support, and that's where we rely on our superintendents. So it's important, I believe, that our starting position, even though they can change based upon the allocation and the enrollments of schools, the numbers need to be consistent in order to support. The second point is it really has become clear through a number of conversations around this table, and especially when I see some of the executive superintendent's titles, they're, library, music, art, drama, or library, or, like we need central staff to support the staff in our schools. And we also need central staff to support the operations of our schools. And I'm concerned, and I think it's really good timing, because we have a director who's very experienced with the school boards and very experienced with the ministry, to have a perspective on an operation of this size, what really is needed. We have outdated systems for tracking or supporting data. I think if we had a modern system for tracking data, then you really have a better handle on some of your operational issues. We want, to manage our attendance. We need an appropriate system to do that, and we need people to do that. And there are a number of other things that I frankly am not even aware of, because it gets into the belly of operations of the system. And I just can touch the surface of it, but I believe it's a really good opportunity with fresh eyes to think about a multi-year plan of putting back in. It doesn't mean it can all happen right away, but it could be a goal, and it could bring some hope, and it could also help us understand the bigger picture. I think as trustees, we have a handle of the school positions, but we don't have as good a handle on the central positions, which we have gone to first over the last number of years to cut to try to balance. So that's the motivation for these two. I'm not hamstringing staff, because we're still talking about projected forecasts in terms of the staffing positions. Ultimately, it becomes part of a bigger budget discussion. But I do think it's important to signal to the system that the people in the system matter to the board, and that when we think about doing staffing, even though it ends up being a board decision, we don't cut and put back and disrupt the system for no reason to disrupt the system. So those were my points of why I thought it was important to do it tonight before the staffing meetings next week. And although I realize committee just makes recommendations. And I thank my colleagues for moving and seconding it. And I hope it has support at this point. And perhaps Mr. Chair, staff might like to comment. Thank you.
So thank you. And through the chair, as Trustee Laskin indicated, this report is coming forward on Tuesday. So any decision tonight wouldn't impact the report that's going on Tuesday anyway. So I'm just wondering if we can defer the conversation, and when trustees see the entire school-based staffing that staff is proposing, to defer to the Tuesday meeting.
If I could, in my 7 seconds left, I know staffing's coming Tuesday, which is why it was important for me to do it today. I think that staffing that comes on Tuesday has to come with some options depending on board decision. If we don't do it till Tuesday, there won't be any options on the table to consider. And that's why I personally believe today's timing is more important than deferring it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to, with no one else on the speakers list, I'm going to pass the chair to Trustee Lee. Because Trustee Wajwani is mentioned on the, Trustee Lee, are you in a position to take the chair?
Oh, yeah.
Chairman, I
Through
can't.
Point of privilege, I believe. Trustee Earhart, I put myself on the list as head trustee Lee, I think. I don't know if you can see that from there. Thank you.
Oh, okay, so we got multiple rounds going, sorry, and I was looking at the end of round one. So I will get back to you, Trustee Earhart, and we have noted your request. Trustee Lee, can you take the chair?
I can absolutely take the chair. Chairman, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And through you. I guess I'm supportive of this because I think it's been apparent through the last year that centrally we've cut as the ramifications of years after years of years of cutting centrally. A lot of times we don't understand what that is because when Associate Director Zucker comes and identifies that there's potential savings to be had here if we cut in this area, there's just a dollar figure that comes with that. You don't understand what that means because those decisions, after they're approved, are operational in nature. So you don't get to see where these positions where you lose them, and you don't get to follow them through the years, and you get to see as we're getting leaner. You just get to the point where it's become clearly obvious that that the line is behind us, and that we're past that point, and that we're too lean as it is. And if we had the resources, we would be reinvesting. So as the budget numbers are, there's just really intimidating and really large, but I'm beyond the point where I'm willing to sacrifice more staff that are making valued contributions in our system and in our board. So I'm in favor of these. So I thank Trustee Laskin for the motion. I thank the movers and the seconders for bringing it before us tonight. With that, I'll take the chair back. Trustee Lee, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McLean. You can have the chair.
Thank you. And I noticed that Trustee Lee, you've added your name to round one. So Trustee Lee, you have the floor.
Chair McLean, did Trustee Earhart put her name before me? Sorry.
Yeah, that's just round two. That's I think the.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I fully support the need for additional vice principals in our school. Every conversation I have with school communities that needs a vice principal, it's apparent that our principal administrators are absolutely overloaded in those instances. So when it comes to budget, if we have any cent left, this is something that I would definitely support. However, given the conversation we had tonight, and also given staff's commentary, I'm wondering if it is possible for staff to calculate the cost to this and add it to the future report as a line item for trustee consideration, instead of blending that cost into the overall trending financial position, like the motion is suggesting. Through you, Mr. Chair, to staff.
Through the chair, yes, that's possible, and staff appreciates the recommendation.
Okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the movers, it is, I think, once again, it is your prerogative to make an amendment or changes. At this point, I do not support blending the trending cost into our financial position, because it would make the make the situation more murky and less clear in a discussion that's already full of confusion. So I would highly encourage an amendment to ask staff to include the additional vice principals as a line item into staff's report. That I would fully support. But as it stands, I cannot support including the cost of the additional vice principals into the going forward run rate of our financial positions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Trustee Lee. Well, Trustee Earhart's up next anyway, so we'll go to round two and we'll go to Trustee Earhart and she can share, if she's so inclined, a willingness to accept the friendly amendment that was offered.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just start. The reason why I put myself back on the list was because, and it's the late hour, my apologies. I wanted to note very clearly that the motion would add back those additional staffing positions that were added in the 2024-25 budget. So I want to, it was noted that those were elementary vice principals, 20 elementary vice principals and 8 secondary vice principals. But what wasn't noted were the other very important staffing positions that were added back, which include 2 caring and safe schools, 12 social workers, and 11 child and youth counselors. And so just to be clear, this isn't just a vote, as I understand it, about vice principals who are very important. It's a very important staffing role, but it includes other staffing roles as well. And to me, it's the principle around it is the staffing positions that we have as our starting from this year. There are other aspects of our financial forecast where we fund beyond what the province provides us that are included in our starting financial forecast. And so to me, that is why the motion as it's drafted would make sense. I am moving on behalf of Trustee Laskin, so would defer to her if she were amenable to that kind of change. But I will say for me, what motivated me to move this was that it's consistent with how I understand a projected financial forecast to be, which is that we start with the areas that we are currently funding, even if they exceed what the province provides for us. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Earhart. Trustee Laskin, you're next.
Yeah, no, thank you through you, Mr. Chair. I believe, as Trustee Earhart said, it's important to start where we're at. And the assumptions built into the projections remove these positions. They didn't remove spec ed positions. They didn't remove transportation positions. They didn't remove other things that we're over on. So I don't believe they should be removing the school-based positions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Laskin. Seeing no one further on the list, and we have a mover and a seconder, then we'll open the vote, please.
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Oh, Trustee Earhart in favor. Sorry, it hasn't come up on the screen yet. Oh, there.
Trustee Lee's against.
Trustee Patel against.
We're good. And that carries. So the last report of the evening is item 4.6, which is the update on the 2025-2026 update for central savings, which is on page 97 of the agenda.
Through the chair, I'll be quick in the interest of time. Through the projections the deficit recovery plan that was provided in August, staff identified $5 million of operational savings that would assist us in balancing the budget. So far, you'll see in the report that there's $1.5 million of expected increased revenue related to permit fees and another $600,000 related to general interest courses, breaking even or projected break-even position for general interest courses. So we're at $2.1 million. As we continue to work through the budget and find operational savings, we will continue to update trustees. So today it's just here for information, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Associate Director Zucker. Does anybody have any questions for the Associate Director? Hearing and seeing none, I need a mover and seconder for receipt.
Lee move.
Trustee Patel will move.
Trustee Lee.
Trustee Lee will second. Thank you, gentlemen. Can we open the vote, please?
No results. No results yet.
Lee is in favor.
What?
Trustee Rajwani in favor.
Trustee Patel?
Favor.
Thank you, sir. And that carries. And with that, the last thing on the agenda is adjournment. I want to thank everyone for their contributions tonight. Thank you again to Trustee Rajwani. And hope everyone has a good night. I need a mover and seconder for adjournment.
Move. Trustee Earhart.
Trustee Earhart's happy to move.
Trustee Rajwani can second.
Thank you, Trustee Rajwani. All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Still no results from Humber for
No?
Lebanon.
Gray on the map, so
Yeah.
see that close.
No,
Okay.
no, there's no results.
So there's
reported.
What's not in?
Did someone break his voting machines?
I think he's.
Oh, okay.
And
Sorry.
anyway, big majority again. Very disappointing.